Um, my name's Louise Bennett. I've got two colleagues here, Andy Smith and, as the remote moderator, Ian Fish. And we come from the British Computer Society, which is the Chartered Institute for IT. So it's a professional body for IT in the UK, and it also has groups of people across the world. We've got about 70,000 members. It's, as I say, an international organization of IT professionals. The three of us are in the security community of expertise, and within that community, what we do is to assist in drawing together the views of the IT profession on issues for government, both in the UK, in the European government, and at places like the UN. And we make policy suggestions about how things should move forward. So we interact with national and international governments. We have the next one. We've been very concerned. Our membership was of 70,000 people was surveyed to say what they thought the major worries were on the internet. And always one of the top three is how to manage your identity on the internet, particularly how to ensure that you don't become the subject of fraud, you don't lose money, you don't have your identity stolen, and you can act safely on the internet. So we do a lot of work in this area. And for the last 5 years, we've been producing an annual workbook about the identity issues that are important and that are coming up globally. And you can find these on bcs.org/identity if you want to look at how the problems and concerns on identity on the internet have developed over many years. This year, we did something different. We decided that there really was a need for both the professional body and for people in the IT profession to be able to help their families, and for the general public, because we're a charity and our charitable aim is to make IT good for society. So we thought the general public needed to have more information about identity management systems. And so what we produced was this yearbook that I've put round the place, which is simply about how to recognize a good online identity scheme. And what we tried to do was put in simple terms the areas you needed to consider, because like so many things in a complex area, there isn't a right and wrong. In some cases, we would say something is much better than something else, but in other cases, it's a matter of your own personal opinion. I mean, a lot of people have been talking about privacy online. Now, different people have different views about how much they are concerned about their privacy online. So I'm not going to have the same views, perhaps, as you're going to have. But we do need all of us to consider what we should do. And what we've tried to do is give examples of why it might be important, why it might matter to you. And the first and obviously most important is what you're actually trying to do online, because in different contexts, your privacy, your online identity matters to different extents. If you're doing a financial transaction, you're going to spend money. You don't want to lose that money. You want to get the goods that you're trying to buy. That's a very different thing from just trying to get access to a website that's going to give you information, say, for your project at school. You know, and they often, which annoys me very much, say, give your email address, you know, have a password, and you think, why do they need that? All I'm trying to do is access a publication or get some information. So obviously in different situations, you want to manage your identity in different ways. And this is what this publication is intended to look at. But one of the things that really worried us and why we gave this workshop a title of Preventing Exclusion via Cyber Identity is that many countries are now going digital by default. And that means that they're saying it's much cheaper for us to provide services digitally. A lot of our population have got mobile phone, mobile access, maybe a PC, they can go to a library, whatever. And so that if we can give them those services online, that will be cheaper for us and maybe easier for them. But it may not be easier for everyone. It may not be possible for everyone. And if they stop offering those services in other ways, you can have big problems. In some countries, I don't know if there's anyone here from India. Well, one of the great things they've been doing over the last 2 or 3 years is to produce an identity scheme that, for the rural population, that enables them to get their subsidies directly using their online identity and cutting out the middleman, which means much more money goes to the intended person, the intended recipient. And because the population, a large part of the population was illiterate, they've done their identity management through biometrics, through fingerprints. But they're also farmers. And, you know, I've got a little cut that I did with a knife on my finger, and that would make my fingerprint not very good. But if you're working in the fields all the time, you may not have any fingerprints. You know, it may be very difficult. So you have to think about these types of things. But it has been very successful. It's been rolled out to hundreds of millions of people and has enabled people to get their allocations, their rural payments directly and not have a large part of it taken by a middleman. So that's the kind of things that need to be considered and we think are very important. Central to operating online, as I said, is individual identity. And I'd now like to hand over to Andy to talk about some of those identity problems.
It's interesting being in Mexico because one of the first things you notice here is English is not the first language. And one of the big problems, I mean, I've been playing with identity management systems now for nearly 20 years. And one of the big problems is a lot of identity management systems on the internet are designed by white men in lab coats for white men in lab coats. They fail to take into account the fact that the world is very diverse. A lot of the services that you find on the internet, in fact, most of the services you find on the internet are still in English. There are services now in Chinese, Spanish, French, but it's still predominantly English. And what's really interesting, simple example, I ordered a sink on the internet a few weeks ago. Okay, but I ordered it from Italy. Now the whole website was in Italian with options for English and German and French. But the terms and conditions on an Italian website were only in English. And you see this with a lot of systems on the internet and with identity systems where you're legally obliging yourself to do something by agreeing to those terms and conditions. If English is not your first language, you really want those terms and conditions to be in your native language, be that Spanish, Hindi, Chinese, whatever. And we need to do more to try and persuade people developing these systems that they need to support diversity. Too many of these systems are still causing exclusion because they do not support all of the different cultures, languages, belief systems that you see. So another example, we were developing an identity card system, and one of the ideas before people registered their fingerprints was to actually use alcohol wipes for people to clean their hands. Okay, for all of us, that's not a problem. But for certain devout Muslims, having alcohol was like, no, we can't do that. And they hadn't thought about that sort of very simple thing from a cultural and religious perspective. And when it comes to things like biometrics, it's fine saying, let's have a biometric system for our identity system. And I don't know about you guys, but I've got a very nice mobile phone, and a lot of people I know have iPhones. They all use fingerprint readers. And that's great for most people, but what if you don't have hands, or you have fingers missing, or you work in the cement industry where it basically completely destroys your fingerprints? You can have iris, but not everybody can see, and iris readers don't work if you've got cataracts and things like that. So it's about designing identity systems that are inclusive and can handle the exceptions and do exception handling properly. And if you get an identity system right, you can actually use those differences and those exceptions as biometrics in themselves. So if someone doesn't have particular fingers, that's actually a very good biometric. No one's going to chop off their finger to steal someone's identity, we hope. So, we need to look at how, when systems are developed in the States, in the UK, they're developed to support all of the other countries, especially the next billion who are coming onto the internet. You're seeing now a lot of other countries are coming on. They've never had the internet before because they've never had that telecoms infrastructure in the country to support it. But with cheap smartphones and 3G and 4G technology being rolled out, you're getting a lot more countries where large numbers of people are coming online because they've got smartphones available. And it's supporting those sorts of people, especially as having these smartphones means they can now do all of their banking, and they store a lot of their personal information on these devices. So it's getting people to understand that authenticating to the devices as well is really important. Because once this thing has stored all of your passwords for all of those websites you log on to, if someone gets this and gets into it, they then get access to all of those other things where the passwords are stored. So when you have something like a smart device, authenticating to the device itself is really important, and making sure you have that in place to do it. So we've got a set of questions that are sort of in this document, but what we wanted to do was discuss with you these questions and get your feedback and get your input on what you think is important.
I'd like to emphasize that the document that we produced was produced by a group of 25 people initially who are specialists in the area, and then it was posted round our whole community of 70,000 for anyone to say, is there something we want to add? And we did include things we got from previous IGFs, hoping that it covered international questions as well as just concerns that are common in the UK. And what we really want to know is, are we asking the right questions? What are your experiences? Are there things that you can tell us that we can improve this for the future? So if I take the first question, just to get it on the slide, we've put, how do you ensure IDAM systems don't foster exclusion. By that we mean identity management systems. So the kind of things, we've covered some of them, covering different languages, supporting those with educational, physical or mental challenges of any sort, and usable for the kind of transactions that people now who are coming onto the internet for the first time may want to do. So has anyone got any examples of good things or bad things they'd like to tell us that we can discuss and inform us about how to do things better in the future? Have I got any, can I persuade anyone to bring something up?
Yeah, I
Could you
have
give
a
me your
question.
name?
Yes, Natalia from Paraguay.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. Is there an age limit for having an identity management?
There's no age limit for having an identity management system, but there are age limits for doing many things. So, and those vary. One of the problems is they vary from country to country. So in the UK, you can't have any credit card. You can't get credit online if you're under 18. But you are allowed to have a debit card to take money out of your account when you're 12. So you can have a mobile purse or something like that when you're younger. There are obviously restrictions, and one of the things that is of great concern in the UK at the moment, we're just having a bill go through Parliament, is the protection of children online. And you may have been to other things here that are about that. And we're just producing a standard thing called a PAS, now I'm not going to go into acronyms, which is on age verification. And it's being produced because the government is bringing in legislation that says that people who have explicit sexual material online, pornography or anything like that, which is legal for an adult to see, they've got to make sure that children don't see it. So how do you make sure? One sort of default way that people make sure at the moment is they say you've got to pay to look at this content using a credit card. Then the assumption is that you can only have a credit card in our country when you're over 18. That's not necessarily true in every other country. So you have all sorts of different, really complicated things. But age verification associated with your identity is very important. But when you think about that, sometimes you just need to know, is that person over or under a certain age? You don't need to know their name, their date of birth, everything else. And this is one of the things that we're trying to do with this new standard, is to say, you can use it to decide that the person is, say, of an age to be able to buy or do a particular thing that has an age limit for it. It's the same as, I don't know, there are a lot of young people here, so perhaps you go to clubs and things, and you have to be over a certain age to go to the disco or to go to the rave or whatever it is. Is that true? Anyone have that? Yeah? And so sometimes they ask you for something like, I don't know if in your country, in your school, you have any sort of card that enables you to get lunch at school or something like that might say it, or a student union card, something like that. Well, people forge those quite a bit, but they often have things, a driver's license in the UK, which you get when you're 17, will have your name, your date of birth, your address and things on it. Now, the bouncer at the club, could see that. He shouldn't see that. He should just know that you're over or under the age that you're allowed to go into that club. So there are a lot of very difficult things here, but if you do age verification, that is a very useful thing. And we actually think the system that we're bringing about in the UK at the moment will be very useful for people in lots of other parts of the world, and we hope it will become from starting in the UK, will become an international standard so that people in different countries can say, yes, I'm old enough to buy cigarettes, I'm old enough to buy alcohol, I'm old enough to do this, but also I'm young enough to do this. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so if you take, for example, Facebook, technically you are supposed to be over 16 to be able to use Facebook. But there's no way at the moment of Facebook being able to confirm how old you are. So, you know, you get a lot of people on Facebook who are under 16. And that causes various problems. And that's not the only thing. There are lots of services where people need to be of a certain age to use them, but they can use things like stolen credit cards or other forms of fraudulent identity in able to gain access. So the identity systems themselves don't really have age limits, and you shouldn't have age limits in the identity systems themselves. In fact, what you want is an identity system that anyone from like a 4-year-old to a 80-year-old can use. But ones that clearly show when you go over 16, go over 18, go over 21, go over 65. So you can easily evidence that you're over 65 and entitled to pension. Yeah, you're entitled to things that senior citizens are entitled to. And then it should be, the authentication on there should be strong enough and link the identity to the person in a strong enough manner that online services such as Facebook, banks, the pornography industry, the alcohol industry are able to use that to confirm and evidence they've checked people are of a certain age.
Does that answer your question adequately? Do you have things in your country where you need to verify ages to do various things?
Well, 18 is the age for becoming an adult, for example. But for drinking, this is something funny. For drinking, you can drink only when you are 20. So at 18, you are an adult. But for drinking, you have to drink when we are 20.
Yes.
But no. But about Facebook, for example, I know some parents that have children that have Facebook profiles that the parents themselves have helped their children creating their profiles. So maybe there is another lack of capacity building also for parents, not for children, about privacy and data protection.
Yes, and what is quite interesting is quite a lot of people in the UK, we're one of the few countries that doesn't have an identity scheme at all. We don't have identity cards. And so we've had great problems obeying a rule from the EU that we have to have a government identity scheme. And in fact, some time ago, when the previous government came in, they threw out inventing an ID scheme for the UK, because in the UK, for various reasons, there's an absolute visceral dislike of ID schemes. The last time we had an ID scheme was in the Second World War, and everyone had ID cards then, and you got your ration book to get your milk and your sugar and your meat and things. And I'm old enough that I remember that. I still have my little cardboard ID card that enabled me to get some sugar and things, or my mother to get them for me. But we've always hated ID schemes. And so we've got a very complicated system where a lot of different suppliers have got to obey rules and provide identity systems. And it's and it's voluntary that you sign up to these. But we need these systems for quite a lot of things. And some of the data that they're using to say, are you the age you say you are, is on social media. So if you've gone on Facebook lying about your age, you're going to have, and that's going to be used to cross-reference with something else about how old you are, who you are, etc. You're going to get into actually a terrible muddle, about what age you are and can you do this, that, or the other, and what is your identity. So there are lots of interesting things, and I do some work with child protection online, and talking to young children, they usually say to me, oh, there's a friend in my class, these are 9, 10-year-olds who's on Facebook. Of course I'm not, and you know that they are. And when you say to them, well, has it ever occurred to you that there might be older people pretending to be younger on Facebook? Because that is the way that, really nasty people groom someone by pretending. And they look at me in horror and say, why would anyone want to pretend they're younger? Because when you're 9 or 10, you want to pretend you're older. You can't visualize that there's someone of 40 trying to pretend that they're a child. Why would anyone want to do that? So that there are a lot of reasons why you need to know these things, and you need to do it well. Is there anyone else or any of the Chinese from Hong Kong got some questions?
So I'm Connie from Hong Kong, and I'm 15 years old. And Hong Kong teenagers have faced a problem in Hong Kong that we have to create an age in our accounts that is much older than we actually are. For example, when we open a Facebook account, we have to set that we are 25 years old, so that we don't have any restrictions to any of the content on Facebook. And also in Google, when we set up different accounts, we also have to create a larger age for ourselves, because if we're like under 18, there are some kind of pages that we cannot access to. But then these websites might be useful for our schoolwork or for our projects and research. And this actually creates a huge problem. Like, this age restriction has created a huge problem for us. So that us teenagers would choose to create a larger age so that we can have access to these information. And also in social media, like all kinds of social media, there are also many kinds of age restrictions. Like, you have to be over 16 or you have to be older than 18 years old in order to have an account. However, like, before you're 18 years old, this is actually a crucial stage for us to meet more new friends, new people, and keep in touch with people that we meet all over the world. And if we don't have these social media, we cannot really have a good path or a good tunnel to keep in touch with these kinds of people. So we tend to choose to create a larger age for ourselves. And yeah, these age restrictions actually pose a huge challenge for us teenagers. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's a different challenge to the challenge that I was trying to prevent. Have you or any of your friends ever, because you've perhaps pretended that you're older than you are, have you inadvertently seen things that have shocked you and that you would really rather not have seen online?
Well, not really, because like in our school, teachers are actually willing to teach us like what should we see and what we should not see. And so actually these kinds of teaching has actually helped us a lot in knowing what kind of knowledge that we should get in touch with and what kind of websites that we shouldn't get in touch with. Yeah.
Well, I think you're very lucky that you've obviously got very good teachers who understand what you're really doing and are making sure you're safe, given that you're bending the rules just a little bit. But one of the problems is that not all schools and teachers and parents actually understand that and can also realize that they can make sure their child goes to the good sites and gets the good things, but is kept away from the harmful things. It's a very difficult problem, but if you've got good teachers and you've got parents who understand the right thing to do, then I'm glad that it's working for you, and I hope it's working for all of your friends. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I have the same thing because my daughter's 12. She's on Facebook and uses the internet a lot. And she uses it for schoolwork. She uses it for all sorts of things. But you have to be over 16 to be on Facebook. So her and all of her friends are between 16 and 18, as far as Facebook is concerned. But there are problems with that in that there are people that have created identity schemes that use information from social media. Now, that will also have my age incorrect. I work in security. I'm paranoid. I only put my personal information on websites that I really trust, like government websites. I don't put, let's say, accurate information like dates of birth and that on sites where I don't think they need it. So my date of birth on Facebook is wrong, but it's consistent across all of the websites. So they've all got it wrong by the same amount. And this is one of the problems you see on the internet. Organizations, companies, websites asking for more information than they need, and therefore people putting in inaccurate information to protect their privacy and protect themselves online, which means that what they're trying to achieve doesn't actually work properly. But with something like Facebook, the reason that they have an age of 16 is because that's when you can legally sign up to terms and conditions. Now, I don't know how many people here have got Facebook accounts. I presume quite a few of you. How many of you have actually read the terms and conditions?
No one at all.
No, that's what I expect. And
All right. Because you've read the terms and conditions.
that's the same. Both of us are not on Facebook. I'm no longer on Facebook because I have read the terms and conditions.
So let's give you some of the terms and conditions, and perhaps you'd like to add to that.
But this is the thing. There are certain sites I'm not on because I've read the terms and conditions, and things like Instagram, they brought in changes to the privacy agreement on there that they basically owned the right to use all of your pictures. So any picture you put on Instagram, they've got a right to use it. They did change it so that they owned it, but they backed down on that one after 3 million people left in 2 days. But this is where we come to the other problem. All of you guys have Spanish as your first language, don't you? Right? Are the Facebook terms and conditions in Spanish? They are. Oh, that's brilliant. For a lot of websites, I didn't know they were because I've only ever seen them in English, and that may just be because I use the facebook.co.uk.
Thank you. In Mexico, by law, or the law that protect the internet users, the consumers, and ¿cómo es el titular? Yes, in the privacy data protection law, if you are a provider of service or internet, through the internet, you have to publish the terms and conditions and the privacy policies that is called aviso de privacidad in Mexico in Spanish. you cannot publish them in English.
Right, that's good. I mean, the Canadians and the French have obviously done it for French. There are certain other countries that have started bringing in laws like that, where if you sell or provide a service into a particular country, it has to, the terms and conditions have to be in the local language. But, for example, if you are accessing a service that's hosted in the States and like an information service that you wouldn't normally access or isn't provided directly to Mexico, you would still have terms and conditions in English there. And it's a lot of the minority language. I mean, how many people are going to put terms and conditions in Welsh? How many people even know that Wales exists? So, you know, it is really important that laws like this come in to force to actually make all these big service providers put their terms and conditions in a language you can understand. But you do technically need to be over 16 to agree to them.
I think as well as the languages, you've got the problems of the length of the terms and conditions if you look at them. If you do go and look at them, they are long and they are complicated, and you think, oh, I can't be bothered. I want to, that's right, I want to buy such and such. So, you know, why should I read all of this stuff? Agree, yeah. And one thing that, again, our institution has been pushing for is just a little traffic light system. Something very simple, saying the sort of green light would be something like, we don't share your data with anyone. Now that is nice and simple. The amber light would be, we use your data to improve your experience on our website. And the red would be, we share it with we sell it to other people. Yeah, something like that would actually, well, I don't know, let's have a show of hands. Do you think something like that would be helpful and useful as a way of making terms and conditions, rather than just ticking the box, you know, thinking, actually, I'm not sure I want you to sell it on to, I have no idea who. Would people think that something like that was useful if we pushed for that? Shall I have a show of hands? Oh, you see, I'm very persuasive. No, you not. No, tell me.
I don't agree.
Right, okay.
I heard some comments, young people mainly,
Yeah.
say that they mainly don't care about their privacy or data protection, for example, for access Facebook.
Yeah.
They just click, yes, I accept, I understand, because they want to be on a social media. They want to share with their partners and see the pictures and whatever they do on social media. They don't care, it's just they say, I don't care, it's just my data. I'm not a criminal, I don't have anything to hide, so why should I care? I want to be on Facebook. So in that case, maybe there is a need again of more capacity building about the need and value of privacy. I don't know what do they think.
How many of you, yes.
Related with that comment, in our countries, in Latin American countries, in mostly of them, the law requires the proof of the express consent to give the data, especially the sensitive data. For example, I don't know, it's different in different countries, but the sensitive data, you need the proof of express consent, and in some cases signed consent, and it's different than that you are proposing to manage the data or the privacy issues related with that.
Well, certainly, just before we came in here, I was at a meeting where the Mexican data protection regulator was talking about your laws, and I was actually very impressed that your data protection law seems a very good, very robust one, and that's important. But that isn't true in every country, and it isn't true with everyone who might be supplying something to you in a particular country. And I think that's it's a very important thing. Do you want to? Yeah. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I know I need to do this in the mic.
Yeah.
I think that one of the problems with data protection laws is that it looks great on paper, but even within different government institutions, let alone companies, let alone public services or NGOs, what have you, they're not respected. So here we have an example in Mexico where to get a fiscal receipt, to have tax deduction, you have to give fiscal information. Your fiscal information in many cases and your fiscal address would be your home address. So I go to a gas station, I need to get a fiscal receipt for the receipt. What I get as a receipt isn't enough. I have to give my fiscal identity number, and I have to give my physical address, my physical fiscal address, which is where I live, to the gas station attendant, to the grocery store attendant, and they input it all in. And actually, technically, now, that is no longer legally required because it is a violation of privacy. But the fact of the matter is, most of the computer systems, which is why I love what you guys are proposing, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Most of the computer systems developed by everyone is, well, it's default. If that field isn't put in there, then you can't get a fiscal receipt. It's ridiculous. And if we begin to look, we'll be having a workshop on doxing. If we begin to look at this, it's a huge vulnerability for people to be found physically where they are. And so we see, unfortunately, and it's not just the case of Mexico, of course, you have really good laws on paper, but even across the agencies, it's not in effect. And then what you all are trying to do in terms of people who develop this and are working in many different sectors. So really celebrate the session, and I love the code that you're suggesting, the stoplight system. I think it will make it a lot easier to make decisions. So now we have a situation where also, those databases, that gas station is responsible for protecting your private data, but what capacity does it have, right? So, it's a good law, but what sort of support is given to having good security systems for all those gas stations that are collecting that kind of private data? So, just as an example of how complex your guys' job is, which you seem to be doing very well.
That's very kind of you.
We've
got a remote question.
No.
No, it's not a remote one. It's just I wanted to intervene, but actually the last speaker has just said more or less what I wanted to say anyway.
Yeah.
What I was going to say was looking at the Mexican situation, where I agree with you. I heard the same thing as you did. The laws seem to be very, very good, maybe even better than ours in UK, but certainly very good. And I appreciate what you said about explicit consent, but if that explicit consent is assumed to be the tick in the box at the end of saying I explicitly consent to this, at the end of a 7 or 10 page set of terms and conditions which nobody's read, that doesn't have a lot of value.
Yeah, just a quick follow-on point from, if you have that sort of a problem where you've got to put in your personal address in order to get a receipt, depending on what that information's used for and whether you actually need the real address to be on the receipt when you actually go to submit claims and that. This is an example where I tend to put in, let's say, slightly inaccurate information. So on websites, I tend to use 16 Church Road, Bedford, which is the church. It's a perfectly valid address, but it means that I can't be traced to where I actually live. And for a lot of these things, they don't need that level of information. If there's a good reason for it, I put in accurate information. So obviously on all of the government websites, I put in accurate information. But there are too many organizations online who basically see your identity data as a commodity, as something they can use to make money, as something they can use for marketing, or something they can sell on to other people. And although it's getting better, and certainly in Europe it's much better than the rest of the world because we have very strong data protection regulations, there are still a lot of countries where improvement's required. And until you get that, you just need to be careful what information you put in to all of these forms online and what information you share. It may not affect you so much today when you're like 14, 15 and messing around on Facebook, but when you go for a job in 4 years' time or 8 years' time, all of that information is still there. You know, you can't delete stuff from the internet. If you know my email address from when I joined the internet, you can find postings I did in 1988. It's still there. So, you know, you have to be careful. All of those lovely pictures of you with a traffic cone on your head, drunk in a bar, they'll still be there when you go to try and get a job. So you have to be careful what you share and how you share it, and how you protect your information, what identity credentials you use to protect your information. We want to go on to another one?
Yeah. Do you think that you as a user should govern your own identity on the internet? You should own that private information? Or do you think, are you happy for the government to own it or whatever? Anyone got any views on that? In China, does the government provide an ID system? Do they own your personal data, or do you own your personal data? Can you look after it yourself?
Well, in Hong Kong,
Yeah.
well, applying for different accounts, like all of them, like the information, yes, it has to be for the government. Like some of them are for the government, and whatever they actually require us to input like some certain information. For example, your name, and you also have to enter a specific contact method. For example, they let you to choose whether you want them to contact you via telephone number or via your email address, and yeah, and these information are actually do belong to that specific company, or if that account is related to the government, and yes, it is, the information is given to the government.
So are you happy about that, or do you think, in the UK, quite a lot of people are offering services where you can put all your personal data into a sort of locker or vault, and then you can decide how much of that personal data you're going to share with different people. You can set all sorts of parameters. That's really quite a complicated system, but people who care about their privacy think, I'd rather do that than have other people own that data. Are you familiar with any of these types of systems? Do you have any views about them?
For us, we believe that actually these information might be actually benefiting ourselves, because if you keep your information all to yourself, not letting the government know, and when some cases happen and the government may not be able to protect us, like it creates a negative effect if we actually keep all the information to ourselves. However, if we give part of our information to the government or those private companies, when we actually encounter some problems, it may actually help us to protect our own privacy, like more than we protect it ourselves.
So your view is that it can help you to assert your rights, say consumer protection rights and things like that,
Yeah.
if you do that. Do other people agree with that?
I think you can select some information that the government wants well, it may help you in that some time, but some information I think you should, well, they shouldn't have it because it depends about the situation, and it's supposed that you have privacy and you have an identity there. So I think some information like your name, maybe just certain about your dates, maybe you can share about with the government. But there are some information, some dates that I think you shouldn't share with that government. I think you have the right to select which information you want to share and which information you want to share with yourself. So, well, that's all.
Okay, just been told we've got 1 minute left. Do you want to say something, Andy?
We've got 3 minutes left.
3 minutes. There's someone over there, yeah?
Yes, I'm sorry. I was trying to negotiate with a person online, Zaur Rahman, who wanted to make an intervention. He could have done it by video, but we cannot now do that because we haven't got long enough. But he wanted to draw attention to. Can you put this up at all? Something he's written a paper about called Universal Unique Identity.
Sorry, universal?
Universal Unique Identity, and he's given us a website, so we can probably publish that in the thing. He's given us a web address for it.
Okay, well, what we'll do when we edit the TypeScript, if you've written it down, we'll put that website onto it. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, I was only going to make a quick point. I mean, basically, do you guys agree that you should own your personal information and it should be your decision who you share it with, rather than someone like a government having that information and them deciding who they can share it with?
Louise, we can put. He is actually online video as well. If do you want to hear from him briefly? Have we got a minute or two?
We've got 1 minute left.
Okay, let's get him on.
Okay,
Oh.
well, it's got 5 seconds left. Guys, while they're trying to sort that out, thank you very much for showing up. I mean, this is really an important subject. Unfortunately, it wasn't very well publicised in the brochure. It's actually been a very informative discussion. It's really good to hear from sort of the Mexican side of things, and thanks for participating.
And we hope that you'll find this guide useful and would make you think, what do I want to do and why do I want to do it? And we hope that you'll be able to share it with your friends. Are we going to get the person online?
No.
We've lost it. Okay, well, thank you all very much for coming along, and we hope you find the information we provided valuable. Thank you.